Not going to talk very long today. Just a couple of things to say. Um, if you haven't done it yet, fill out our. Ooh, that's even worse. Yeah. Um, if you haven't filled out our survey yet, do it. We're trying to get together enough survey results to actually make this thing significant. So do that. It's on the Slack channel or in our general channel, so you can just hop on there and do a quick search and find it. I don't think this thing is on anymore. Anyway, next week we have Will Wade. Will, are you here, Will? Will's coming at us next week, so come for that talk. It'll be a good one. And the week after that, I believe we have lightning talks. So come talk to me because I still need a few people. If you're never going to talk before, it's a great thing to get your feet wet, 5 minutes, and talk about whatever you want to, and we'll get you on. I think that's it. Adam, everybody give it up for Adam.
Thank you, everyone. So hopefully you'll get something out of this talk. But first of all, let's go into what this talk is not. So this talk's not meant to shame anyone, but rather inform about ways you can contribute to an open source project or more than one open source project. We're not going to go into proprietary versus free software or freeze and speech versus freeze and beer or Libre versus gratis, as some other people like to call it. And everything in this talk is actually talking about a general case. So things will differ between projects. So expect some of that. So go into who I am. I'm Adam Jimerson. I'm a software engineer at Code Journeyman. I am also the lead community organizer for the Google developer group Gig City. I'm a FLOSS and technology enthusiast. I'm also a PackBSD developer, which is a Arch Linux and FreeBSD based operating system. And it's just an all-around geek. If you have questions, comments, or anything, feel free to reach out to me via email, Google+, or anywhere else you can find me. Twitter gets ignored, though, so know that. So most of us make a living off one or more open source projects. That's pretty much a given. Who here actually contributes to one, though? OK. Who thinks they could contribute to a project? At this point, everyone's hand should be up. So hopefully, by the end of this talk, you'll realize that. So some example projects are operating systems like Linux distributions or Berkeley software distributions, otherwise BSDs, or Minix, or anything like that. You have web servers such as Apache, Nginx, or Lydie, or any of the others. You have web browsers, Firefox, Chromium, or you have databases like MariaDB, Postgres, or SQLite. There's also programming languages that you can contribute to, or text editors or frameworks. There's a huge list of ways you can contribute. The key is finding something that you're passionate about and care about and get into it. So some of the larger and older communities, such as the Linux kernel, has members in it that tend to be blunt about things. And this tends to scare off people, either new or old. If you find a community like that, don't let that affect your view on open source in general. But it may be smart if you get offended by it, leave that community, find another project, join it. Not every project has a member like Linus Torvalds. So this is actually a very interesting statistic. Last year, Stack Overflow did a survey, and one of the questions they asked is how much time you contribute to an open source or a side project in a week. And out of the 16,000 responses, they found that the average developer contributes over 7 hours a week to at least an open source project. So what are some of the ways to contribute? Well, first of all, there's, or why you should contribute, I should say. First, it betters the tools that you use. It betters your skill set as a developer. You get a sense of accomplishment by doing it. It can help you out in the job field, because a lot of companies now are actually looking at open source contributions and weighing that into whether or not they should hire you. You get bragging rights if you like having your ego stroked or anything like that, and the list just goes on. So due to the fact that naming things in the open source world is hard, we have one law that has two different definitions. And this law is called the Linus Law, named after Linus Torvalds. The first definition was coined by Eric Raymond in his paper, The Cathedral and the Bazaar. This version deals with bugs in open source software. It generally states, given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow, or more adequately, given enough time, or given enough beta testers and co-developer base, every problem will be characterized quickly and obvious to someone. The second one is by Linus Torvalds himself, which was in the prologue of The Hacker Ethics and Spirit of the Information Age. This deals with the motivation of why developers do what we do. And that basically gets summed as every motivation that makes a person do something can be classified under three categories. You have survival, social life, and entertainment. Progress is defined by moving from one category to the other. So doing something not necessarily for survival, but for social reasons, and then later just because you find it fun. So what are some of the ways you can contribute? Of course, everyone knows there's code or patches. You can also contribute documentation to the project. You can do financial donations, reporting bugs, and you can advocate for the project, or just take time and join community, post in message boards, mailing lists, chat rooms, or go to events. So we'll get into contributing code. Or as Linus Torvalds once said, talk is cheap, show me the code. Contributing code and patches is one of the most involved ways to contribute to a project, but it has the most impact. It makes the largest difference to the project, and the efforts pay off as soon as your patch gets merged into the code base, and you'll be actively working with the community, so you'll make bonds or friendships or whatever, however you want to put it. So how do you get started? Well, some projects have documentation that details the recommended ways of getting started for new people. If the project does have this documentation, reading through that would be a good start. Another good resource would be to go to the project forums, if they have them, or a mailing list or chat server, and just ask around there. And it's recommended for starters to find smaller tasks. The good way to find those is going through the issue queue or to-do list, or just asking other people if there are tasks that you could do, or at least help with. Most projects will leave these easier tasks and push them off till later, because they're working on things that are a little bit more complicated, and they know they can quickly shoo those in. But it also makes a good way to help new people get ramped onto the project, because then the focus isn't on the code itself, but rather the process that they expect you to contribute. So larger projects don't generally allow contributors to directly push changes to the code base, but rather use a patch or pull request method that must be reviewed by one or more project members. Once the project project members feel that you have a feel for it, then they'll give you what's called a commit bit or commit access. The reason why they do this is to ensure that new people don't introduce bugs or breakage or security holes, and make sure that they know that you have a feel for the project. It also allows for more experienced developers to mentor new people and to help them get the feel for it. While still in the early stages and you have to wait for these patches or pull requests to get accepted, sometimes they can take a while because not everyone's doing this full time. Most people are actually doing this on their free time and they just get busy. But at the same time, if you have a pull request that's been waiting for a while, it's usually a good idea just to bump it and make sure that they haven't forgotten about it. And lastly, always reach out to other people, because if you get stuck on something, chances are someone on the project will be able to help you out. You're not expected to know everything yourself when you're contributing. So doing this has several benefits, both for at work and your personal life. The benefits for work is it will, sorry, it gives you the ability to get exposure to like new languages, frameworks, or tools that your company may not be using now, but may be helpful to them later on, or solve a problem that you guys are facing now, but haven't looked at. It will also allow you to expand your knowledge and skill set in general outside of work hours, and that helps out because then you become more experienced in general. And it allows you to get experience working with distributed teams, which is beneficial if you're not working in a complete remote environment and have to deal with that every day. You may not be used to having to deal with the fact that all your developers are in different time zones or things like that. So you get experience there. It's benefits outside of work. By contributing, you can list it into your profile or resume, and this could play a big part in helping you get a job or get a better job, because they'll see that and they'll be able to review what you're doing, and it'll help them get a feel at where you're at as a developer. And it also helps ego, because you feel good about it. It helps give you a sense of accomplishment, as I already said. And so the feeling you can get when your patches are accepted. And the feeling you get when you're shipping a release. So another way is contributing documentation. So sometimes documentation for open source projects are lacking, or sometimes just doesn't exist. This is an actual screenshot from the GPG for Windows documentation novice section. I would say it's pretty intimidating. Other times it's written in ways that just leaves the reader confused as to what's going on. And then sometimes it can actually be humorous. So this is a screenshot from the Git documentation talking about their use for SHA-1 hashing and the very rare possibility of a SHA-1 collision hash, which, spoiler, it's a 1 million billion to 1 chance of that ever happening. But looking at the last paragraph, to give you an example, if all 6.5 billion humans on Earth were programming, and every second each one was producing code that was the equivalent of the entire Linux kernel history, roughly about 1 million Git commits at the time that they wrote this, and pushing it into an enormous Git repository, it would take 5 years until that repository contained enough objects to have a 50% probability of a single SHA-1 collision. A higher probability exists that every member of your programming team will be attacked and killed by wolves in unrelated incidents at the same night. So some of the reasons why documentation goes bad is because the documentation is written by the developers, which, because they have an in-depth knowledge of the project itself, they actually end up writing it in ways that are that they leave out important details. It's very sparse, and that leads it to being confusing to the end user. Another reason it can go bad is over time, new features get added, old features are removed or changed, and the documentation never gets updated to reflect that. Or another common thing is the documentation is just never written in the first place. So most of the larger teams will actually have a team of people whose sole purpose on the project is to maintain these documentations, making sure it gets written, making sure it's updated and current. If the project does have a team like that and you want to contribute to the documentation, it's highly recommended that you get in touch with or at least join this team. Some projects also have a guide on how to contribute documentation. And if there's no such documentation, then you can just at least reach out to someone. Some of the helpful things that you want to know is where you need to submit the new and updated docs. What format is it used? Is it in a wiki? Do you need to write markdown or something like that? And if you need special permissions, so if you need to be able to access a Git repo or if you need to be able to access the wiki page. Another helpful thing to keep for documentation is to periodically go through and check that the existing documentation is still valid. So if it's like a documentation for installing it, it's smart to, on occasion, just run through it, making sure that the documentation is still current. Another good way to do this, find someone who's never installed it before, sit down with them, and make sure that they can follow the documentation step by step, noting anywhere that they have problems. Shameless plug. If you're interested in doing this for PackBSD, get in touch with me, because we're getting ready to hit this point where we need to test installation. Things to keep in mind. Some projects have a very strict style guide, and it'd be beneficial, or this is either for a functional, because they do some of the formatting to actually mean something, or it's just a stylistic one. It's very important that you stick to it. Some projects will keep their documentation in a wiki page or another online system. A popular one is like Read the Docs. These typically allow anyone that registers or anonymous to make changes. And while good, this can also be bad because sometimes people are nefarious. Other projects will keep it in a version control system like Git or Mercurial. And so you'll need to be able to commit to those to do it. So what do you get out of contributing to docs? Well, like code, you can add it to your resume or portfolio. It helps you develop or improve your technical writing skills. And it can also help with a job if you are a technical documenter. So you have proof that you know what you're doing there. And then, like contributing code, you get experience working with distributed teams as well. Another big way is financial donations. So last year, the Drupal Association actually ran what they called the Drupal 8 Accelerate. And what this was a public fund that people can contribute to that they use to help fund code sprints, reimburse people that were actually making changes, so contributing patches, doing security audits. They can say, I spent this many hours, and they would pay them out of this fund. I don't know the exact number that the association raised, but they did pay out $227,000 in grants last year from it. Yeah, something around there. So why donations are important. It helps cover hosting costs and other project-related expenses. So this is like the hardware for the servers, bandwidth, SSL certs, but now Les Encrypt, so that's not that much of an issue now. It also pays for project mirroring. So if you're need to mirror your repositories or anything all around, you usually have to pay for that. It helps fund code sprints and other events that gets developers into the same place. And some of the larger projects even have people that are employed full-time, and that's their job. So by donating to it, you're helping make sure that those people stay employed. So most of the larger projects will actually have a foundation that has 401c status in the US, which means that your donations are actually tax deductible, which who doesn't like that? Some of the foundations focus on their project or projects, but like the Linux Foundation, the FreeBSD, or OpenBSD, and the Drupal Association. But some of them actually are an umbrella and they cover multiple projects. There's been times where they helped other projects. Like last year, the guy who maintains the network time protocol, it was just one person doing it, and he was hitting a point to where he couldn't maintain it financially. And the Linux Foundation and Free Software Foundation both stepped up and issued fairly sizable grants and promised to keep doing that throughout the years. So that's very important because we all rely on the network time protocol. So that was very important and very good on their part. Other foundations, like the Software in Public Interest, supports multiple projects. They support 38 execs. Some of them include Debian, Arch Linux, Free Desktop or Xorg, FFmpeg, Jenkins, LibreOffice, OpenWRT, MingGW, Postgres, to name a few. And the Software Freedom Conservancy is another one. And they do projects like Boost, BusyBox, Darks, Foresight Linux, Git, Inkscape, Mercurial, PHPMyAdmin, PyPy, QEMU, Samba, and Selenium, and Wine, and about 20 other projects. Right now, the Free Software Conservancy is actually really needing donations because they made the decision to go after VMware for GPL violations over their new hypervisor violating the Linux kernel. So that cost them support from VMware and a bunch of other people. So they are about 2,500 short of being able to operate throughout 2016. So they are in desperate need. And for January, all donations are getting matched. So this would be a very key point in donating if you want to help out a foundation. Other ways you can donate. Most of them will have other ways of directly donating. This will be like PayPal or Stripe or GitTip or Flatter accounts that you can make donations to. The new hotness is projects accepting Bitcoins as well, but I've only seen a few of them actually do this right now. Projects may even have places where you can purchase shirts, stickers, or buttons branded with the logos, where a percentage of all sales goes to the project, or have an affiliation link with a e-commerce site where just buying anything helps out the project. And there's also sites like UnixStickers.com where they'll do a sale on a bunch of things and a percentage goes to that project. While you're not being asked to donate a lot, any little bit does help. Another key way of contributing is by reporting bugs, because sometimes the unexpected happens. By now, everyone's probably tired of hearing others say, file a bug report, but there's a reason why I included this. Most bugs go unreported. I don't actually have proof to back that up, but I'm just going to put that out there. So over the years, open source software has gained a reputation of being generally buggier or not as good as the proprietary counterpart is. This stems from the fact that developers can't account for every use case and can't test for them. So maybe the hardware in your computer is different. You have a different chipset for your graphics card or something, or you have a different version of a library installed that they've tested against. So you have bugs there. By submitting bug reports or commenting on existing ones, you help the team understand the issue and help lead to getting it resolved. And this helps out people getting into the project or using the program later on by helping them avoid the same issue you hit. So at some point in your development career, you've probably seen bug reports that sum up as, it's broke, or it crashes on me, or even worse, it doesn't work. These kind of bug reports are useless. General rule for making a good bug report is including things like what it was you were doing when the issue occurred, what you expected to have happen, what actually happened, and if there was any error messages or codes thrown, and things like screenshots or logs, for example cases. that can reproduce it. So if like it crashes or errors out uploading or reading a file, maybe you can send them a sanitized version of the file so they can test against that. And when submitting screenshots, logs, and things like that, it's always safe to redact personal information in it. So again, the first three, you be very as descriptive as possible. Think paragraphs rather than a sentence, if possible. So another big way is advocating for the project. While it doesn't mean going this far with it, or even this far, if you can do this, then that's awesome. So some of the ways you can promote open source software is by giving out swag like stickers, buttons, or anything branded with the project logo. You can also promote it through social networking like sites or podcasts, or just writing a blog post about it. Another way is to talk to people like family members, friends, or especially your employer, where switching to open source could improve security and reliability, as well as keeping the cost low. And because you can't always put an XKCD in your comic in your presentation, except this one was relevant. So when you hear people talking about different tools, if you can recommend an open source alternative, try to give them pros and cons to it. That way they can make them as informed of a decision as possible. Other ways you can do is you can organize community events or groups for the project and help raise awareness and develop a sense of community around in the area. Examples would be like throwing release parties or hackathons or sprints or a camp or convention for the project. Lastly, you can just give a presentation about the technology at conferences. It doesn't necessarily have to be a conference about the project. It can be anything. So like a good suggestion would be submit a talk to something like a bar camp where it's just general technology, and that may help. By doing this, you help get the word out about the project. It could lead to a larger user base, maybe even get more people involved in developing the project, and in general, a larger community leads to it being better off and lasting longer. So, just do it. Thank you.
Questions? Any questions? Right over here.
Just out of interest, that guy with the tie-dye shirt, that was the dude that moved to, what was it, UC whatever, somewhere in California or Virginia or something because of the LSD studies and stuff?
Him?
Yeah.
That's Richard Stallman of the Free Software Foundation.
Oh, sorry. Totally messed that one up. I should know that.
Yes. I tried to find one without the halo because I didn't know how well that would go over. So.
Any other questions?
Posed by that?
Comments?
You're obviously aspiring.
This is a picture from Adam from the future.
I already have the hair. The beard needs work.
Working on that. All right. Anybody else? Comments, questions? All right. Come back next week for Will's talk. Give one more round of applause for Adam. Thank you, Adam. Thank you. And we'll see you guys next week.